Yeah, so anyone that has Handshake would be able to create a transaction that allows them, that signals that they want a certain block list to be used by the Handshake community. And then it would be up to resolvers to then implement that block list. So if, let's say, like everyone on this call, they all voted to have a block list that's hosted by, let's say, like the Handshake Institute, then all the resolvers like next DNS would say, okay, on chain, we can see that the most conviction within the community is behind this particular block list. So we're going to start using that block list. But then maybe Namebase comes out with their own block list and it's more robust, or it has like whatever, like more trademarks on it, whatever people value more. And so people move from the Handshake Institute block list to the Namebase block list. Yo, what's good? Sorry, just met my friends. And so now it's totally open. It's totally verifiable by anyone. People can choose to not use those block lists if they don't want to, but there's a public record that everyone within the community has signed on to use these block lists. And I haven't really figured out how to way to like make the block list itself like vote on a specific block list. But what you can do, so have it's set up now, is that you vote to a TLD, which we can have on chain. And then at any time, if someone doesn't like the block list at that TLD, they can switch to another TLD that hosts the block list. So the block lists are adaptable. You're basically voting on, I guess you could say like an ambassador or a steward for the block list. And then if you no longer agree with that steward's decision-making, they can switch over to another one. Yeah, I think that's it. There's some other things like you could use it for, and then you can use this functionality for like other things, but I think that's as much that applies to like this conversation as far as like trademarks and the code of conduct and whatnot.
Yeah, so it sounds like the motivation behind this, and also anyone feel free to, this is our first time trying like a large Zoom call, but for now, just let's experiment with just like unmute yourself and just talk. No worries about like raising hands. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, the motivation behind this is for, there's both like trademarks and then you also have like egregious names. And one way to disincentivize people from using those is to have like a community curated block list. So what I'm hearing here is using the conviction voting that you shared for deciding which block list to use. But I'm curious if it's possible to also use the same for creating a block list as well. Because what I can imagine is, like, one thing I imagine is you could also have a, like anybody can just create their own block list, and there can also be a specific block list that is decided through conviction voting as well. It's like another option.
Yeah, well, you can do that today. Like you can, oh, go ahead.
I mean, there's an amazing article I've been reading a couple times. It's like protocol, it's about protocols. And I mean, I could have my own family block list, I believe, right? I mean, Keeb is more technical than me, but I think the point is there could be like a main one, like a community one that hopefully many people subscribe to, but I could make my own if I knew how to, but I could make my own and maybe my family or my friends could follow that one. I think that's true, right, Keeb? I mean, anybody can make it and implement it. It's just who subscribes to it, right? Or who follows it, like browsers or users, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be only one.
Yeah, so everyone can make their own block list today if they wanted to. And I'm pretty sure all of the, maybe not the ICANN TLDs, but I'm pretty sure like there's some TLDs that are implemented as a plugin already. So like .eth, I think maybe isn't in the actual Handshake root zone, but it's like implemented as a plugin where that domain can't be resolved or something like that, at least for the moment, I think. But yeah, anyone can create their own block list today and they can share that. They can post it on GitHub or Saya or anywhere. And other people can adopt that if they want to. But it would be hard. I mean, but if you're doing it in this like whole kind of, that's more of like a centralized process. And then if it's like these big names, like whatever, Cloudflare, and they have their own block list and no one really knows what's on that block list because it's not public, it's just somewhere in the repositories. And no one knows like what that criteria is or blah, 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 why they're using it. Then it kind of defeats the purpose of Handshake in this whole uncensorable internet. Yeah, so the idea behind this conviction voting is that it's all public, it's on chain, it's verifiable. Anyone can see which block list everyone is voted to, and therefore that kind of like adds some legitimacy to the actual block list that these entities might be using.
Just so I understand it, would this be up to the entities to decide if they want to use? So essentially, if Brave starts allowing Handshake to resolve, they could decide to use it or not to use it, and if another browser a year from now they could decide, or would there be any like enforcement of it where certain things wouldn't resolve?
It would be entirely opt-in. So it would be opt-in for the actual resolvers if you're using a delegated resolver, like whatever or individual people can decide if you're running your own HSD resolver or HNSD resolver, then individuals can say like, okay, I'm running my own resolver, but the community wants this block list, so I'm going to use that block list for myself because I'm going to trust the community is trying to protect me or whatever.
But yeah, I don't think there's a way to like totally filter everything for everybody, right, Keeb? I mean, the browsers or the users would choose to, if today's call, if we choose one and promote one, and then like with your conviction voting idea, which sounds great to me, but I mean, I still think that people obviously could view anything on the blockchain that they wanted, right? I mean, that I think people should understand that, but it's just something like if we get our most popular, most community voted blacklist, whatever, that was adopted, that would be pretty powerful and would, discourage trademarks or abuse to be used, right?
Yeah, so if whatever block list the community decides to do, as I said, it's adaptable. So it's like adaptable. So you're just like speaking to like a steward and they can change that block list at any time. And if they become too aggressive with that block list, like they block .namebase, that people can say like, hey, we don't agree with this decision making anymore. They can start moving their votes from that steward to another steward. Yeah, and of course you're always free to run your own resolver, and then you don't have the block list at all.
Well, yeah, so it does sound like this is, the block list would work best at like the resolver level then.
Yeah, and I think that's how HSD is designed. I'm not like totally positive, but as I said before, I think some of the TLDs that are currently blocked or reserved or whatever are implemented through a plugin system like we would be using for this. That's kind of how handover works for .badass. They just like implemented a plugin that says, if you make a request to this TLD, like do some other thing that's not normal DNS lookup. And that's basically the same thing for this block list. If someone tries to go to whatever .nazi, then this plugin would just say like, oh, hey, actually, this plugin is saying that that domain doesn't exist or it's not resolvable or whatever.
Hey, this is Helen. It's good to be here. I have a question. This is the first time I'm hearing about this. What would be an alternative if not adopting this, just out of curiosity? Are there other examples out there?
Yeah, so just for context, this call was really to kind of discuss some like hot button topics in the community. And I think just kind of based on the discussions over time, a couple of things we want to address is like, what do we do about name squatters, right? People who register trademark names. What do we do about people who snipe like personal names? And what do we do about like really, really egregious names on Handshake? And so Kiba actually shared this really awesome suggestion for one way we might go about doing so, like literally like an hour ago, maybe an hour and a half ago. So like this is all still just like a totally open question, and we're just having an open discussion about these. Yeah. Just for context.
Yeah, I think there's another top. I mean, we jump right into the technical or the list, but I think the main point of the call is to just, I think it's just having a policy, even though we can't I don't think it would be possible to enforce everyone, but I think one goal for the call or the discussion is that we agree on a code of conduct, that what the majority of the community believes is the way we should behave. And we reference that when maybe somebody on, doesn't follow that code of conduct, at least we as a community can have this as a reference to say that community member, while they are in the Handshake ecosystem, they're not following what we as a majority of the community believe in. I think, right, Johnny? Is that one goal for today?
Yeah, and it's not just me, it's really up to like the entire community, what
I noticed
the overall.
I think that's so. Like, there's a Namer News post that's about this call that maybe we could read some of the comments. Like, Encirca has been pretty active in the community, which has been great. Tom, I believe, is. So he was linking to some other examples. Maybe we could even reference that or even share a screen. Johnny, I don't know if you want to share. I don't know if share screen would be helpful, but maybe we could also use some other code. I think he referenced some existing other.
Yeah, so I've gone ahead and just kind of compiled like relevant comments from Encirca and others about that they've shared about this in a Google Doc. So I'm going to share that in the chat right here. I can share my screen. I don't know if that's the like highest leverage thing to do.
Okay.
But one thing that might be helpful is to actually define what cyber squatting is. I've gone ahead and kind of looked at Wikipedia, looked at GoDaddy, looked at some other relevant platforms, and it's nice they have like a very clear definition, which is so to register a domain with the intention to profit from it, specifically if it's a trademark belonging to somebody else. So if your intention is to sell it at a profit, then it's considered squatting, and yeah, that they can come after you for that. So similarly, and I think this and I think this point is relevant because one issue might be that a lot of bidders just don't actually know what constitutes as squatting in even the traditional domaining realm, right? Like a lot of Handshake namers are just new to both DNS and blockchain. So they're just kind of coming in and like, ooh, Oreo, let me get that name. I was like, so perhaps, I mean, one solution could really be just more education on what even constitutes cyber squatting, what that even looks like.
Yeah, I think another issue is, it's happened to me, I don't know, probably others, you see a name on the auctions and you're like, oh no, is that the actual person or company trying to get it? Or is it a squatter that's trying to get it? And then you're like, do I bid on it or not? Because do I want to win it to help? Or do I let whoever is doing it win it and hope that they're doing it for good intention? I don't know. I think others hopefully would agree. I've seen that so many times on auctions personally. I'm like, but I agree, John. I think just having a definition. I think another one is, I think some people don't know what to do. They win the name and they do want to get it to the right person, but they just don't know how to even get it to the right person. I think that's another issue.
Yeah, and that's actually something Graham and I are addressing right now. Within the next couple of days, we'll have a site launched where people can upload a CSV file or submit individually in a form names that they want to be gifted, but perhaps the recipient, like, depending on what their handle is, we've had a couple of situations where, like, just based on the user's handle, the recipient was hesitant to accept the gift or was unsure of like whether it was legit. So we're creating a centralized list where people can search through names that are intended to be gifted, where they can just upload, again, the names for that. And then we can also optionally take custody of that and just facilitate that process. So we're, yeah, that should be live in the next couple of days. We'll share more information. I did also run across, while we're on the topic, I ran across a case where somebody's squatting on Jack Butcher's name. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He runs Visualize Value, has some a lot of cool content, and recently he's gotten into NFTs, but he has over 100,000 followers and just had his Twitter deleted. And he made an NFT of his account suspended screen and tokenized it and called it decentralized. Both his name and company's name are both taken. I tried putting in a bid for multiples of what they paid for it, and they responded with a $250,000 H&S offer. So I don't know if, like, they clearly know the kind of who he is based on the counter bid, but I'm still trying to determine whether or not they know that he's looking for the name and is like actually really interested in claiming that. So I've shared a couple of links out for that, and hopefully we can find the owner of that and encourage them to gift that. So if you know anybody that might have it, reach out to them and let us know.
I think this is Helen again. I think that brings up an interesting point of just like the scams and the hacking that happens just related to anything blockchain, crypto related. I actually, this is embarrassing, have fallen for a crypto scam before and have went through a masterclass of what happens with like the FBI and whatnot on that front. But I know that there are some sites that, and specifically Coinbase is really good about blocking specific addresses. So I don't know if that could be something considered for the code of conduct, or like a list of nefarious people and the addresses to block them within the H&S community. But that came to mind hearing your story, Mark.
Yeah, I'm also really interested to learn more about Kiba's solution of the block list. That sounds like a great idea, especially being that it's completely opt-in from both the resolver level, so whether a browser or resolver wants to even offer the block list, and also on an individual level of choosing which block list you might want to implement, if it any at all. I think that would go a long way to help that, and it ties into the conversation we were having with Jothan, about the public suffix list lately. So I think that kind of creating our own public suffix list and block list would be a great way to mature and progress the community. So I don't know, is there an ETA on when that could or may be implemented?
A public block list?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think one thing that might be important is so it does sound like we're mostly on the same page for the desire for one. Just to take a couple steps back, I think one thing is we should first put out on the table, like, what are all the issues we do want to address. That's kind of the idea of the code of conduct, which can then guide like the actual execution of that, right? The enforcement of that. So prior to actually discussing the block list stuff. Thanks, Kiba. Enjoy climbing. Yeah, it could make sense to really go over the high level steps first. So Tom from Encirca did share some specific points he wanted to run over as well, which I can go over right now. So his agenda topics would be anti-cyber-squatting code of conduct and a top-level domain dispute process. Yeah, and 2 possible questionable behaviors up for discussion: how to discourage shill bidding, which sniping brand names, personal names, and registering someone else's brand or personal names for the purposes of gifting. Because yeah, he shares that there's like a fine line between gifting and cyber squatting. And his suggestion is, unless you actually know this individual personally, or you've reached out ahead of time, to not actually try to claim their names for gifting. So interesting point there. But I think with Mark and Graham's gifting, what would you call it? Like program?
More like a gifting platform. It's at this point more like matchmaking. So like somebody, it's non-custodial for the most part. So somebody could just upload lists of names that they intend to gift. There's a review process so that somebody can't just like mass spam the whole list. We'll review those and then manually move them over after they've been verified. And then anybody can search through that. They can reach out to us or the public facing email for it to express that they want to claim it. And we could, based on the information provided by the gifter, verify them through social media, like them sharing a tweet that they're verifying their account and claiming their Handshake name, at which point we can put them in touch with the gifter, or if we're the custodian, then we'd be able to do the transaction ourselves. So right now it's still a little laborious for that, but I think in terms of being able to create like a trusted central authority to distribute the names, especially because some of us already have like hundreds of names to gift, doing that as an individual would be extremely slow and cumbersome. And so we're just trying to facilitate that and build some more authority around the space that's doing that, so they feel safer gifting or receiving the gift rather.
Mark, I love Mark and Graham, great initiative there. I love that. I think that's phenomenal. Honestly, I think one of the best ways to limit the squatting issue and also just get more people into the space is through culture, and by highlighting people who've been doing a phenomenal job gifting names, and also other people who've like maybe gotten valuable names but then gifted them to, you know, someone who is like more rightfully the owner. By highlighting those as like the ideal community member, I think that will go a long way to kind of just like nudging people towards adopting that good culture. One thing we've been thinking about recently also is I don't know if you guys saw, there's this Name or News post where we're kind of talking about this sort of like referral feature that we're thinking through right now. And I think it was 0x Stefan who actually responded about this, and I didn't really realize it at the time, but I think it actually would help, where we were thinking of doing it where if you refer someone, you would get like 50% of any commission that they make from the marketplace, you know, like buy or sell, you know, through the first year. But then also if you gift a name to someone, you would also just automatically get their referral commission. And the interesting thing there is that that could also incentivize people to gift names, especially because you're only going to squat on a name of someone that's like relatively high profile. You know, like no one's going to squat on someone like some rando person and be like, oh yeah, they're going to pay me like $1 million for this. Like it's only going to be someone kind of like semi high profile anyway. And if by gifting names, people automatically can get like a referral commission from that gift, then presumably the incentive to gift might even be higher than the incentive to like squat on their name. Because if you squat on someone's name, you're not going to be able to get their referral commission. But if you gift it to them and you get them into Handshake, and they are really active in the community, then potentially that can be like way more lucrative. And you'll also probably feel better than if you're just like squatting on someone's name. So that's like another mechanic that I think might, in addition to your like gifting list, the gifting platform, that could also help reduce some of the squatting.
Absolutely. And yeah, we're looking forward to launching that. The DNS is propagating now, so it should be live in a couple of days. And we'll also have an optional box for people to include their name or handle if they do want credit for sharing. And so we'll have a leaderboard of sorts for the most gifted names, and we'll also have a dashboard of metrics or stats page for like the number of names that have been submitted over a period of time to see if like more names have been like explicitly earmarked as to be gifted, and then what the average period of time it takes for someone to claim the name, things like that. So I think that by creating that leaderboard, especially if we can incorporate like referencing people's handles as, you know, how many names they've gifted, and maybe, you know, like include some of the numbers that went straight through name base also, that could be a great incentive for that.
Hello everyone, I have a question. It's about squatting. So I just want to know, for example, like GoDaddy, when they sell top-level domains, this is not like squatting too, but any company from them, this person and from them.
Hey, I can't really hear you too clearly. You're really muffled. Is something possibly blocking your mic?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
A little better.
Hello everyone, I just had a question about when you talked about squatting. So I just wanted to say, like for example, company like GoDaddy or any registrar that sell sub-level domains, if they, for example, doing squatting too, because people pay them for the name. And my second question is about if you buy a Handshake domain or Unstoppable domain or anything, they have many sub-level domains with names, so you cannot really control that. So if somebody can answer me.
Would it be possible for you to actually ask this question in the chat? It might be a little more clear. Cool, thanks. Also, hi, Jonathan. Thanks for joining. Cool.
I think he was just saying GoDaddy. I think he just said GoDaddy is, or these are current infrastructure, current system is allowing cyber squatting in some form, or how do we control it as a TLD owner, and somebody registering SLDs that are cyber squatting, I think is what he was saying.
Yeah, so cyber squatting is really interesting in the traditional domaining realm. And I think Jonathan can speak a little more to that, since mine is a very cursory understanding. But based on a couple of readings, it does seem like cyber squatting is like, if it's up for a reasonable price, you should just buy it. Otherwise, you can go through the long litigation process to try to claim it.
Yeah. So Johnny, is this recorded? Would be my first question.
It is. Does that change the content you would share?
No, it just causes me to sanitize, I think, a little bit what I'll say.
Okay.
So inside of the ICANN world, when you bring up GoDaddy, you're talking about like TLDs that are contracted with ICANN, like COM or Horse or others. And all of those have something called rights protection mechanisms. At very least, they have something called the UDRP, the Unified Dispute Resolution Process, or whatever it's policy, that kind of govern some ways for brand holders to get their names back. There's also, court, there's the ACPA and other legal means when there's trademark or infringing marks. Because there were so many new TLDs that came out in 2012, brands kind of stopped proactively buying domains related to their trademark, and they started to do more of a monitor and respond rather than proactively register domains. So it's caused all kinds of different programs that will go out and issue cease and desist letters or things of that nature. Now that's where you can find who is information. When they can't find who is information, they go to the registrar of record and they attempt to get in touch with the registrant through that. In our case, it's TLDs on Handshake. And there really are not that many governing factors aside from some of the precautions that were put in place originally. I do recall when 101 domains TLD was up, there was some form of a message that on request to Namebase, when something's in auction, you may be able to get a notice put up. I don't know what the protocol or process is for that. I'd assume, though, that most like cyber squatting or things like that, whatever you're going to call it, trademark related stuff, is going to be reactive, where somebody's already purchased the name in auction. I hope any of that helps, but typically with GoDaddy, if you've got a domain that's registered and cyber squatting on GoDaddy, there's usually a few different things you can do. But our system's very different. There's no who is information. For example, there really aren't any dispute resolution policies or what's the other part, or any kind of rights protection mechanisms really baked into this, other than those that are ad hoc. Gratefully, the community has been getting them and handing them over to people to kind of attract them in. And the founders in the Bootstrap did the Alexa list, as well as blocking out the known ICANN domains at the time. So it limits, but does not eliminate the possibility of trademark infringement. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Johnny, and anybody else at Namebase, I have a question. Based on the custodial nature of Namebase, if there were somebody that was looking for their name, we'll say it's a high-profile name, and it's at Namebase, would there, I don't know, how open would Namebase be to having some kind of policy, basically again, a formal policy against name squatting, and possibly like transferring that if it's on your platform? I realize that that's towing a very delicate line, so I'm just curious if that's come up in conversation, and what, if any, thoughts you have about it.
Yeah, so
something that we have done in the past is there was someone who got some like public company's name, and then they like listed it on the marketplace, and then they're like explicitly referencing that company as well. I think it was like somewhat generic, so like it could have been for their own personal use, but then they explicitly reference that company. And so in that case, we went to them, we said, you know, we need you to take this off the marketplace. And if you like keep on doing this, then we might not be able to like, you know, we might just have to like kick you off of Namebase as a customer. We would never like seize someone's Handshake name. I think that the biggest disincentive that like we can do is basically being like, you know, you can't profit off this name on the marketplace. And, you know, if you're like really a bad actor, then we're just going to stop serving you, and you can, you know, like withdraw your name to your own wallet and manage it in like Bob Wallet or, you know, like your CLI wallet, but you just won't be able to use like name-based services. So that's something that we did only a handful of times. I think it's something that we could also step up as a program. I was thinking, you know, similar to this idea of like a block list, one potential idea is, you know, like the name that you just mentioned earlier, where there's a guy, you know, with 100,000 followers on Twitter and relatively high profile, and you know, there's someone who has the name listed on the marketplace and is probably not that guy. Presumably that person is just like trying to spawn the name. So like maybe we could have some sort of like crowdsourced list where it's like, oh, you know, these names are, you know, probably should belong to this like other person because they're high profile enough, and it's probably, you know, being squatted on. And what we could do is we could make sure that those people like can't profit off those names easily, like on the marketplace. And that's like a potential program that we could go and implement.
Thanks, Taishan.
There's a code of conduct that the Internet Commerce Association has, which is a very well-respected group of professional domain investors have come together and formed this group that represents domain owners in the you know, kind of the .com ICANN world. But they've got a code of conduct that might serve as a good model here. And they really do point to that a lot as encouragement for good practices in what people are actually registering and collecting. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to push the responsibility for not infringing on marks back to the people who would try to secure the domains. You're not going to make it perfect, and it's very utopian to assume that people would do that, but at least you have some sort of bright line you can point towards to suggest something. The other challenge that you run into is word plus mark. So this is where you might have like Amazon Books, Amazon Movies. So it's like a famous mark plus some other word. And it's very challenging to police that because the shorter the string, the more wide that might accidentally appear to be something you'd block unintentionally. And I've seen that work poorly where you start to work with typo variants of the mark as well. I recall sitting in a presentation that Verizon did when they were talking about something that was infringing on their mark, and it was something called Version Tracker, which was actually a very popular software that would update your drivers and your software on your computer to keep it up to date. So the word version was being picked up as a typo of Verizon, and the extra word was tracker. So you know, you have to find a balance between how reaching the trademark support is and respecting, you know, the rights of intellectual property, and you know, blocking things unnecessarily. Thank you again. I don't mean to speak as much. I like to listen more than speak, but hopefully this helps the dialogue.
Thank you.
Yeah, Jonathan, I do have one. I'm just curious, the code of conduct you referenced, is that the one that's linked? That's the one with like 41 registrars and stuff all signed it together, like 101 domain name sheet and such. Is that the same one we're talking about? I asked just because oh, okay. Awesome, internet commerce. Okay, cool. Yeah, there was one that I saw linked from the DNS Abuse Institute, and the
Yes.
only issue with that one is it was a lot more focused on like there wasn't so much addressing name squatting, and it was more about like the content, how to deal with like what's being hosted on the website, and at which point should you like seize a domain.
Yeah, so there's two vectors to that. And we struggle with this all the time. There's an ongoing battle where registrars and registries inside the ICANN space try to create a bright line as to what it is that we can address as far as abuse is concerned. If we are not tethered to a hosting company that actually serves content, then we are just technically, we're the phone number, we're not who answers. And so we try to really point people towards solving any kind of specific problems to the lowest possible level. If my neighbor is cranking music at 3 a.m, maybe it's right to go knock on their door first and then maybe call the police, but I don't want to take the whole grid down. And when you're dealing with domains and DNS, you're often dealing with things at that, super high level that can have effects that you don't intend to have. When we've got things like second level registrations now lighting up under our TLD names inside of Handshake, of course you can't really mute a whole TLD, but taking something down at that level can be disruptive. We've had, I've seen reports where somebody has a complaint about a GitHub subdomain. You don't want to go through and take down the whole of GitHub just because there's one bad actor inside of GitHub. So you always need to look to the host, the hosted content as being, the specific place where particular types of infringement are occurring. That's typically where it's content that's, illegal, immoral, maybe, might be selling counterfeit products or copyright related type of trademark or intellectual property stuff. Sometimes it's the domain itself though, and they often will work in harmony. But there is no perfect definition for all of that. As you mentioned, the DNS Institute that PIR has put together has some material we might want to lift as far as putting together a code of conduct to point towards. But I think we may not be able to use all of it because our model is very different inside of Handshake. They're dealing with a top level domain. It's really different when you're dealing where our top level domain is really kind of the root inside of Handshake. And so there's less control mechanisms as well. But there are some things we could lift there. And I hope to bring Graham Button, who's leading that for PIR. I tried to get him to come to this call. I might be able to get him to the one next month for the director's call. So I regret that I wasn't able to get him for this call. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that effort regardless. Also, welcome, Tom. Glad you could make it.
Yeah, sorry my camera doesn't work for some reason. Hi, everyone. So I'm sorry I'm so late. I missed all the exciting stuff.
No, you're right in the thick of it. We were actually going over some of the notes I pulled from your comments and such, but now that you're here, do you want to kind of go over the main talking points that you're hoping to cover?
Sure. I mean, I had three talking points. One is the gifting idea, which obviously is wonderful for this community. But there's I have a lot of trademark clients, and they don't necessarily like to be gifted their trademark, right? It's just not something they enjoy even participating in. And so the whole gifting idea doesn't work if you're doing it, I think, on behalf of a celebrity or famous brand. They really don't want to encourage people from grabbing their brands and then, dangling it in front of them like bait, so to speak. So what I love, in fact, I think it was Kiba had a really cool idea for gifting, but my basic idea was, the ideal model is gifting should have a model where you get consent before the name is registered. And I think the reverse is happening today. People are registering names, and they're sitting on them for months because it turns out their recipient is not interested or doesn't respond to any inquiries they make. right? And so they should have done that before they registered the name. It's kind of my sense. So in terms of a code of conduct, I would like to say, if you are getting a name with the intent to gift it, you should have a personal connection with the person you want to gift it to, and you have 30 days. And if they don't respond within 30 days, well, you should figure out how to give up that name, right? Otherwise, you're just cyber squatting on the name.
Yeah, before you go on to your other 2 points, I'd be really curious to hear your reaction to the program the platform that Mark and Graham are putting together for name gifting. Mark?
Yeah, Tom, those are great points, and being that ship has already sailed in a lot of different ways. There's obviously thousands of names that are being held right now or squatted on for gifting. So we're creating a centralized list of that where people can upload all of those names that they have with the intent to gift and or give up custody of them to this gifting platform, where we will be able to verify based on information they provide the identity of the intended or the rightful owner of those names, and facilitate the gifting process, so that so that there's a greater or central authority that's connected in the community that will be able to make sure that the rightful owners receive their names.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach. So if I'm a brand owner or a celebrity and I'm interested in a name, there's a place where I can go and say, oh, there's a clear intent and there's a well-defined process for me to claim that gift, right? I don't have to search down whoever did it, whoever registered the name. I think that's a good approach.
Exactly. And it also creates basically a storefront of sorts where somebody can approach us, and even anonymously, where actually all of our emails are set up through Proton Mail, so they would be able to anonymously gift the name to the entity to distribute, or just keep custody of the name and post the intent and by registering the name with that. So, and that would be publicly searchable by everybody.
That sounds great. That's a good approach. So would the people who originally registered the name, would they, in a sense, put it into a common global escrow, kind of give up control of it? How would that work?
Yeah, that would be an option if they want to give that up, or if they want some kind of credit, or don't necessarily trust us for any reason to do that, they can optionally just list the name in a database with us, and then once we get an inquiry from that person, the rightful owner, we can connect them to the person that owns it, and they would be able to verify for themselves and facilitate that transfer if they wanted. So it would be optional. Yep.
How many names do you think are in that state right now, waiting to be gifted?
Oh, altogether, thousands easily. I just between a handful of people that I communicate with on a regular basis, there's thousands. Just between like myself and Graham, we probably have a couple of hundred ourselves. Some of which some of which are for people that we have direct connections with. Some of them we just appreciate and want to ensure that they get their names and continue doing the great things on their site. But I also recognize your concerns with that. And I also, it's not always received in the way that the gifter intends from the brand holder, because in a way they feel like they've been one-upped, or that they were being negligent somehow. There's an implication that they weren't paying attention, and so somebody else got to it first. So I can certainly see how that would come across to some. And we've also, I mentioned earlier in the chat here that there's been some cases where, just due to the nature of the profile of the person that was wanting to gift the name, there was some hesitation from the recipient. And so this abstracts any conflicts of interest that way away, and creates more of a corporate storefront that they'll be able to receive the name from.
Cool.
Yeah, I see.
Just to add on. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Johnny.
I see Jothan's hands raised. So Jothan, do you want to share, and then Tieshan?
Well, I had to go bid against somebody for Jotham Frakes, and I didn't mind that so much, but I like what Tom's proposing, that there's some sort of like opt-in for this. Sorry if there's an airplane going past me, so it may be loud. But how do we prevent from multiple of us good doers bidding each other up on a benevolent auction that's going to be with a gift intent?
So Johan,
That's problematic.
Into my second category. Let's finish up gifting, and then we'll get to shill bidding.
Okay, this is perfect. So let's hold this since this is the second category. Tieshan, what were you about to say?
Yeah, I was just gonna make a quick point. Really great concerns, Tom. And yeah, I think because of how Handshake works, where basically if there's a name, it's because anyone can bid on it, it's really a matter of like, okay, if the rightful owner, like quote unquote rightful owner, isn't bidding on it, then it either it'll go into someone's hands, and there are like a lot of bots on the network as well that are just like bid up names. So it's kind of like out of necessity that it's like the good actors kind of have to bid on the names to hold them for the who they believe is rightful owner. That's what I'm really excited about this endeavor from Mark and Graham, because I think it'll provide like a really nice central point where people can be like, yeah, like this name should go to like this Twitter user, or this name should go to this brand, and this is where they can go to kind of request it as well. So I'm really excited about that. But I was just basically making the point that like, because of the mechanics of Handshake, it kind of needs to be like you want a good actor to be holding on to it. If it's not going to be the quote unquote rightful actor, it's going to be the good actor over the bad actor, presumably, or like the like the greedy actor.
Also, one point, I don't think I've really seen this yet, but for the actual like in-word of a code of conduct, I would want to explicitly call out no aggressive gifting. Just worried about someone holding someone's name and just repeatedly aggressively trying to get them into Handshake.
So if I just get some closure on the gifting topic, I like what Mark and Graham are talking about for like a repository of names that have already been bought for gifting purposes. But I think we also have to address future gifting activity and whether or not you want to encourage that or set up some guidelines for future gifting.
Yeah, and I think that that would be part of the crafting of the code of conduct, which really should have more community consensus. So, I mean, based on what we've covered so far in the chat, it feels like we should share some of the resources that Jonathan was referencing about the existing code of conduct within another domain community within Namer News. And then after the discussion, open that up for more distributed chat, basically, and conversation around that there. And then after some conversation there, I think sharing out a survey or form to finalize some of the specific line items and verbiage within the code of conduct, just to get some kind of social consensus on a somewhat anonymous level, and then finalize that in the next director's call next month seems like a good way to finalize that.
One last point I wanted just to bring up that hasn't been discussed, and it's probably an edge case, but just like I could see it happening. I got my name from Handshake Jesus, like a lot of people that end up getting a name. But there's another person called Morgan Linton. It's a woman who is facebook.com/Morgan Linton. I don't think she's super into Handshake yet, so I think it's probably fine. That being said, there's this edge case that exists, right? Where, okay, somebody else, gifts somebody else's name, you authenticate, yep, that's their name, and it's gifted to them. But there's somebody else with the same name that is also, hopefully this is all, really, really popular and a lot of people are interested in it a few years from now. And so then that gets complex, right? Because then you could have this weird situation where somebody says, oh, bummer, I really wanted to buy my name. I didn't know. And somebody had bought it and I went to get it and it was already taken, but then they gifted it to another person. I'm wondering if there's just an additional piece that we should be thinking about in here just to mitigate that potential conflict.
And Morgan, are you talking about that the name's taken but hasn't found its way to the recipient yet? So it's kind of
Yeah, like the program, exactly, like the program that Mark is setting up, which I think is fantastic. But if that happens through that program, and so everything's like following the correct path, like everyone's discussing now, and it ends up being gifted to someone who it is their name, they're excited about it, but there was someone else with the same name that would have also wanted it. And during the time that they held it, because there could be that delta of whatever, maybe it's really small, maybe it's only 2 or 3 days, but during that time they looked and like, my name's taken. And then it's like, oh wait, but someone just gifted my name to somebody else. I could see that edge case being worth just figuring out how to mitigate. Not that it's going to come up much now, but I think it's going to be really popular in the future, and then it probably will come up more and more.
I kind of feel like as unsatisfactory or of an answer as it might be, like at a certain point, it's just kind of tough. Like this is literally the only place I've ever gotten my namesake is on Handshake, just because like Mark Smith is super common. So I mean, I'm not even the only Mark Smith in crypto. I'm not even the most popular Mark Smith in crypto. Even from like a social profile standpoint, like the other guy definitely should have gotten the name. I was just paying attention to Handshake. So yeah, thankfully most of the gifting that I've seen so far has been for like social handles, and those are way more specific. And so I feel like that is a better potential for gifting to work in that way. But yeah, for generic first name, surname kind of thing. I think that's ultimately just going to be kind of first come, first serve. But if there's another way that the community can figure that out, I'd be happy to hear it.
So one suggestion which combines these ideas is that there's a list of names that were intended to be gifted. There's a list of intended recipients, but maybe that expires, and if it's not claimed within X days, Morgan doesn't claim his name, he's a recipient. Another Morgan come along and say, hey, it's past its expiration date. Let's open it up in terms of who can grab this name, if they can show they have rights to it in some way.
That's interesting. Yeah. And I mean, from the name gifting platform side of things, that'll we definitely have the ability to add in notes for that, attempted contact 2-3 times through these channels, and either got an explicit rejection or just wasn't able, no response, but confirmed that we have the right social channels. So at that point, if somebody else came in and were able to lay claim to that name, and, preferably through multi-factor authentication, through, Twitter and email or something like that, then yeah, that would be, I think, a really great way to go about that.
I like that idea a lot. Yeah. Because then it at least smooths it over. So if somebody says, I wasn't given a chance, then it's like, no, there's a clear process. There was a countdown, you missed it. Sorry that happened, but we try to mitigate. So at least it shows that there was an attempt.
In the ICANN space, the .sucks registry is doing something interesting right now, where for a number of different brand names, you can go to the domain name, and they've got a landing page that actually has the auth info code that'll allow you to transfer and take possession of that name, sort of as a pseudo gifting thing that they're hoping somebody will take on, and it'll become a registration. So it's like a free first year kind of thing. And it's not being met well within the community. So there's some things about how we conduct this that we could avoid. There's that. I think there's the opportunity to have a delighted response, and there's an opportunity to have a visceral response. And anything we can do to tee up the pleasant reaction and the ooh, what's this, and that delight of where somebody's enticed and excited about what they're getting is so much better than somebody having a negative reaction. So I think the code of conduct thing is going to be very helpful. And do we have? I think I saw a comment, or maybe I saw it very quickly. But is there like an approved list of gifters? Maybe people who can do that outreach, do it with some finesse, do it with some candor and respect, or know how to approach people in a way that's going to get a good reaction. So maybe that's something to fold into this. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, I think if we're all satisfied with the gifting topic, we can go on to Tom's next 2 points.
Yeah. So here's my, I again, I have a lot of well-known brands as customers, and I know that the top 100,000 Alexa sites have been reserved, and that will overlap quite a bit with the top trademarks as well. But what if one of Amazon or the National Hockey League comes to me, they have a brand new brand or business they want to launch, and I say, great, I will go get that TLD for you, and it goes into this auction, and I can't give them any sense of how much they'll have to spend to get this brand new brand. Maybe it's a made up word or phrase. They've already filed a trademark for it with the USPTO, but now that they find out that there's all kinds of people bidding on their idea, basically, right? That's something that they invented and they've got a business plan behind. So the code of conduct kind of says, don't be a shill bidder to, for someone, for example, just outbid me from my home address here in Rockport, Massachusetts, right? And sure, I wasn't bidding much. I think I bid a few bucks, but I'm not going to go, I don't want it anymore. It's my home address, guys. It's of no value to anyone else, but you outbid me for my home address. So I'll just move on and get something else, right? And I think trademark owners are the same way, right? They just won't play this game. They'll just go play in another TLD. They just don't want to bid against their own intellectual property. So the question is, how can you prevent that from happening in this auction type model?
Just to be really clear, could you define shill bidding a little more specifically?
Well, so shill bidding happens in the domain name space when, I'll pick on, a company called Snap Names. Snap Names was a huge aftermarket for buying valuable domain names, and going for tens of thousands of dollars. And they discovered that one of the employees was participating in every auction and just bidding up the price, right? And sometimes they would win, sometimes not, but it was all designed for getting people to pay a lot for names, more than they would have. Someone put Helvarez in the chat here. So this is a guy who has Snap Names that participated in every auction and just bid up the prices just to get people to spend a lot of money. So we don't want that kind of situation happening where people are just competing because they like to participate in auctions, right? They have no intent. They don't want the name. They really don't care if they get it or not, but they just like, competing against someone else, especially if for some reason the bidder is not anonymous and they know it's Amazon trying to get a name. Oh, Amazon's got deep pockets. Let's just engage in a bidding war here, see how high they're willing to go.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, all we can do is encourage people not to do that socially, but it's an open platform, an open protocol, so there's literally no way to prevent that from happening. And yeah, to a certain extent, like the bid that you put in signifies how much you actually want that. So regardless to what claim somebody might have for a name, if they're bidding $5 and you don't get it, then that's on you. So which, I mean, again, that's just kind of the nature of the protocol. And I don't think that many squatters will want, I believe they'll be more price conscious. If they actually have no good intent for it, they're not going to want to risk too much Handshake on that, especially as Handshake climbs in value. I think that the incentives there just will vanish for the most part for some of those names. But it is still a valid concern and something that we should proactively try to get people not to do and set a specific code of conduct to prevent that.
Some people do that to increase the burn. They don't even want to win. They don't want to win, but they want to increase bids to get people to burn more HNS to get the price of the token higher. That's another idea, Tom. So I'll admit it. I do that too. I'll say it straight up. I do that to do. So I mean, it's a game, you know, and if you're just going to open a name and hope that nobody else bids on it and you get it for free, I don't want you to get it for free. I want you to pay for that name. So, you know, I mean, I'm not sure if that's why that person bid on your house address, but sometimes people see something going and nobody else is bidding. They do that to try to increase the price as a strategy.
Some of those may also be bots. I think somebody mentioned that in the Helen mentioned that in the chat. I think is like there are bots that'll bid, I think, up to 10 or 15 HNS just automatically on everything indiscriminately. And so yeah, I mean, like I typically any bids I put in, I won't open more than maybe 3 auctions in a day. I'll usually space them out over a few hours, and I'll do the math to know that, you know, in 5 days I'm going to be available at approximately this time. And I just watch them and turn on notifications for those names, which is, I mean, yeah, attention. It requires a lot of attention, but if you want the names and you're have purpose for them, I think that's really the best way to go about it. Is you really need to be mindful of when they're closing.
So let's talk a little bit about. I'd love to hear more about this bot idea, because now you're saying that, and who knows who's behind these bots, but let me be a cynic and say, oh, it's Namebase. Namebase is behind these bots. They're bidding up their auctions, right? I mean, that's what a lot of people will think. It's inside player just bidding up the prices of these names. So so how do you make sure that doesn't paint a bad picture for the whole environment if there's bots participating in every auction?
Yeah, ultimately it's about freedom. It's a free protocol. So, I mean, like, enter at your own risk. There are some things that we can do to put in guardrails, and we can create, you know, codes of conduct and social norms, and encourage and discourage certain behaviors, and we can create frameworks around the system to help mitigate some of the things retroactively, like the name registry. But some things just are inherent to the protocol, and the ability to automatically place bids or to have claim to any name that's not in the Alexa top 100,000 are a few of those things. So, I mean, ultimately it's comes down to like culture curation and what we can do to mitigate that, or at least disincentivize by creating better incentives, like, you know, really encouraging and rewarding the transferring of trademarked names and specific names to people, and lauding those that do. And, you know, if we find out who's doing other behaviors, to remove them from as many of the platforms as possible and abstract as much of their influence away as we can.
I mean, it's not just the trademark holder. I mean, it's personal people, right? It's an individual. I mean, that's why we try our best to educate people. You know, we try our best to educate people. And I've even done it as a service, honestly, to help some people get their names. Maybe they should ask some of the more senior people to either advise or even do it for them. You know, I think a brand would be willing to pay a company to help them ensure that they get their name. I mean, I think this is still very early, so I think there should be services or brokers or bot. You know, there's even bots. There's bots you can use. People in the community made bots. I use bots. Not on mass bidding, but there's meme pooler. There's tools already that you can use to do bidding automatic for you. So I just think that's, you know, if a trademark owner or a newbie comes in and they think they're just going to win because they have the right to that name, I don't think that's why Handshake was, you know, I created. You know, I think
and
they should be educated a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say, sorry to interrupt. So the brand owners will definitely have proxies going after these names for them. They're not. That's already done in the TLD space. But ultimately, you want adoption of these names. And if there's big parts of the namespace that are dark because people bought them with no intent of ever using them, that's not good for your namespace, right? You want to encourage adoption. So it happens sometimes in the .com space. A lot of domainers, so to speak, just have park pages, and they're, in a way, those aren't being developed because they want a lot of money for those names. And so you want to make sure you don't have a big part of your namespace dark, because people who would be willing to adopt them can't get the name they're looking for.
Yeah, I'm curious. In the traditional domaining world, it sounds like you touched upon that, where there are services for, like, if you want a specific name, there are services to, I guess, like, you call them headhunters, to like get your name for you. Is that the case?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, name-based definitely, I don't think we'd be doing that anytime soon, but if any community member wants to set that up, by all means.
We will also have an area of the site where somebody can list a name that's not listed for gifting, but they're requesting a name. So we also have a central list of requested names, and then can basically create a lead list for anybody that would want to be a headhunter in that way. So yeah, more on that later.
All right, that's awesome.
Hey, Johnny, I touched on this a little bit earlier, but for a trademark holder who sees their name happening in the auction, how do they request a notice like 101 Domain got on that one, where it popped up a message in the auction and said, this may encroach on the brand of somebody, or the intellectual right? I don't remember what the specific, I'd have to grab the screenshot for it, but like, what's the path towards somebody getting that in place if they're a brand?
Yeah, so what happened was 101 Domain specifically reached out to us and asked us to put that notice up. And so that was actually only just for 101 Domain, the name. Now, as Tishan shared earlier, one thing we could do is like a crowdsourced, community sourced like list to do the exact same thing. Right? Name-based, we're not going to do that. But if there is a community, if there's consensus about like really specific names that should just go to the trademark owner, the specific like celebrity name, for example, then I can see that same message with the 101 domain being implemented. Just like any name that matches on the list, we'll do that on Namebase, and I'm like, ultimate decision goes down to our co-founders, but I can totally see that happening. In addition to, I mean, that notice would accompany, like, by the way, you're not going to be able to profit off this name on Namebase because it's on this list.
Well, go ahead.
Sorry, I asked Mark this on Twitter, but so one of my clients is Leica camera, and someone's squatting their name for 300,000 HNS right now through Namebase. So like after it's already been squatted, it seems like there's kind of limited options for Leica at this point in time, right?
Yeah, that's my third topic, Helen. Good segue.
Okay, sorry. I didn't want to jump the gun. Sorry, Jonathan, you go ahead then.
No, that's a perfect example. So the third topic is a way for there to be, if it's found to be some sort of cyber squatting or abuse of a TLD, there should be a dispute process that could be followed to either take down that name and blacklist it or transfer ownership of it.
Yeah, the transferring of ownership, excuse me, would be impossible. Like it's on chain. Once they have custody, like that's it. You have no recourse at that point unless you can somehow identify the person and take like traditional legal action. But even then, like short of, there's just really no way to do that. The black, I think that brings it full circle to Kiba's initial suggestion of having a block list. And so, if they're a bad actor that's squatting on a name, then just blocking it and not allowing that on certain marketplaces so that they're not able to profit from it and they're not able to resolve anything on it or render anything on it, at least for anybody running that particular block list, would be the only recourse at that point.
Yeah, I think the blacklist idea is a good idea. I saw that right up today.
So just one question. I mean, I'm curious as to where the line is in terms of trademark. So for example, even a common word could potentially be trademarked. I'm curious, it's like, at what point does something kind of click into place as far as something which is blacklisted? So is it only for famous brands like, kind of Coke and Pepsi? How far down the line do you go, and where do you stop, and who gets to make that determination? Because of course, every brand holder, even if they're like a small, 30-person company, is going to advocate, well, this is my trademark if it's unique. At the same time, the whole reason why, only 100,000 domains were kind of, registered is because that was like what was considered reasonable. So I'm curious as to like where the line is.
Yeah, it's a great question, Jahan. And I don't know if you were in the call earlier when Kiba was talking about that, but the idea was that it would be a community created list, and there would be some kind of consensus around whatever list is the standard that's used by like NextDNS or other browsers. And so a browser could use like the list that has the most votes for it, basically, which can be done by staking HNS, weighting more so for time in the stake rather than the amount, so that somebody couldn't just like sybil it. It's more about how long you're staking for a particular list. And then from there, it's up to the individual as to whether or not they're actually going to use that. And browsers can implement that on their end. But then if something happens with the list that the community doesn't agree with, that can be forked or copied, and a new list can be socially agreed upon and then implemented in its place. And so I think that to more directly answer your question, like if a brand is explicitly saying this is a problem, we're receiving reports that this is a problem, then I think that would be a good candidate. And otherwise, it would just be based on social consensus as to where that line would be.
And in the bricks and mortar world, trademark infringement isn't just, hey, the string you have matches my trademark. It's actually, how is it being used, right? And so oftentimes you can't complain. A trademark owner can't complain simply because you have registered a name that matches their trademark. You have to then start using it. And if the use is similar to their goods and services, then they got a valid complaint, right? So so there is some fairness in the way that you can certainly go out there and register Facebook as long as it has nothing to do with social media, right? And you might be able to get away with it. But certainly a made-up brand like Pfizer or Viagra, it's tougher to justify, but still not impossible, but a lot tougher to justify. Well, I'm using it for something totally different. No one's going to confuse the two, especially if they made up the word. So use is important here too.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was reading into, there's a specific case with like the Nissan domain name.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know if someone else knows this and could tell it better. But long story short, not the automobile maker actually like won the lawsuit and kept the name, but they included like a picture of like an automobile on their website. And then that led to like a whole nother like litigation process. So it's really interesting how this stuff happens. But once again, down to usage.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just tell you that there is no silver bullet for this. I think Tom could attest to this because he's Tom within Circa, you may not recognize him from the ICANN world. It's an incredibly well-respected brand for brand protection and does quite a lot with intellectual property. He's actually on the blockchain board for INTA, the International Trademark Association. So the fact that we've got Tom here to talk about this is really remarkable. And I'll tell you, in the ICANN world, trademark stuff versus domains is constantly in friction. You can have different classes of goods and services based off of what the word is. Like there's Delta Faucets and there's Delta Airlines. And you don't set your browser or email software into, airplane mode, or, well, I guess you could technically, but like sync mode versus airline mode. There's just no perfect match between the two. And so we're not going to be able to pull something out of existing stuff that's going to necessarily magically solve this inside of Handshake. But we can follow at least some dimension of ways to address that there is a problem and say, here's what we're doing about it. or at least here's some of the remedies that are there. I think that notice piece would be very, very powerful. I didn't realize it was just for like special partners, but I understand the motivation to put that up there. But I think that as I go and have conversations with people inside of Google's, inside of Apple, inside of Cloudflare, and I talk about what Handshake is, they're really looking for us to have this kind of governance that's missing that they're used to. And so things like code of conduct, good answers about trademarks, those are only going to be beneficial for this community and helping to elevate it and lift it up. Thank you.
To add, I just want to add one other point onto the block list point, which is that I think this would also be extremely valuable for puny code, being that there's a lot of puny code that can be made to look like trademarked names used in phishing attempts. And there's also the case of iDNA emojis versus other emojis, alt emojis. And so there needs to be at the very least a list that will add additional friction or a prompt from a browser or any other interface that they're using to warn them of that, or to double confirm basically that they're intending to go to that versus one that may be perceived to be more official. So yeah, I don't know if that would be part of the block list or if it would be more kind of a in between for just additional friction for that, so that there's a prompt that comes up. But that's definitely a conversation that we need to tack onto that.
Cool, thanks.
I'm curious, and this is a potentially dumb question, but like, what is ICANN's motivation to be protecting trademarks? And how would that differ from our motivation for protecting trademarks? I think like it could be framed as like, there's lots of potential ways to frame this, but I think in a certain sense, the hesitancy, like there's a hesitancy around even considering trademarks with Handshake, because so much of it is about like, so much of the philosophy of the community is about like this open world, it's an open protocol, anyone can do whatever they want. But I think there's, of course, a motivation that can be had for fully wanting to protect trademarks and still being like compliant with the philosophy or in line with the philosophy behind Handshake. I don't know if that's super clear right now, and I'm wondering if that would be like a helpful thing for us to even align on. Is like, as a Handshake community, why would we care about trademark support at all? And right now, like I don't think that's super clear. I think the most obvious one is adoption, and that's the one that I personally believe is like, if we can support trademarks, adoption will be more likely. But beyond that, I'm not sure, and I'm not sure if there's consensus on even that point.
Well, let me, Jake, let me give you maybe a response to that. So, and then ICANN is ICANN's mission is security and stability, right, of the internet, and so. A big concern of any brand is they want to be trusted, right? You pay a premium for a brand over a generic because you have some level of trust that you're getting a quality product. And so consumer trust is huge. And so what trademarks are worried about is having their consumers not trust their brand online. So why would we care? Because we want consumers to navigate the name base world of TLDs and trust that they're not going to be scammed or buy counterfeits or get malware, right? So consumer trust is what you're trying to build here. You don't want to be a haven for bad actors, because then that will drive away your consumers who will visit these websites that you're building. So that's really what trademark owners care about, right? Is making sure that you maintain consumer confidence and trust. So what I'd like to see is I see Handshake as the long tail, just like Amazon was a long tail for book selling. Handshake is a long tail for TLDs, right? There are a lot more trademarks out there who. Thousands of them, millions of them, who will not pay $185,000 to ICANN as an application fee but they'll pay 5,000 to auction their name and launch their own brand TLD, right? So it's a massive opportunity, but brands have to believe that this is a clean space and not a haven for bad actors and encouraging bad behavior, because then they won't be able to bring their customer base with them from their .com to their .brand, right? Why would they take that risk and destroy the brand equity they've built? So that's why we care about trademarks, because we want consumers to trust the namespace.
One more comment here is that there's a lot of lawyers involved.
Kind of hard to hear you, Jonathan.
Can you hear me better now?
You sound a little bit like a robot, but you're coming through.
Yeah, it's tinny, but we can hear you.
How about now?
Still the same.
It's fine. Just go ahead.
Oh, I lost him.
Hey, might be reconnecting.
Yeah.
No.
I had switched to Wi-Fi. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So the thing with trademarks is that, and this is an unpleasant truth that we have, that if we ignore it or we just consider it to be out of scope, it will be brought into scope for us. And the thing that I regret knowing is that it will really test the whole decentralized piece. I mean, there's a lot of people who I would say Namebase has at least 90% of the market. And that means that they've done some sort of know your customer for people who hold names. And the lawyers are going to look to find a way to find out who has this and how do I get it. And they can subpoena a California corporation for that information. It unravels. It's a string that will unravel the sweater on the whole concept of decentralized for this project. And I don't want to see that happen. We need to have good answers for some of this stuff. I'm worried about that, honestly.
Yeah, I really appreciate that framing and those answers, because I think I agree that this poses like an existential risk, but I don't feel that there's like consensus from the community necessarily on that point. I think it does seem like up until now, trademarks have been a thing that like we've known are a thorn, but kind of beyond that are something, that we can kind of brush off, or could be like could it be ignored for like philosophical reasons. So I don't know, I think trademarks are this interesting point where like reality is meeting philosophy. And yeah, I don't know what to do beyond that, but felt it was like I needed some clarity on like exactly where those motivations were lying on both parties' side.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting we pole vault over rat turds about this, right? But I do think that we can't be too casual. Like we can't just say, well, that's out of scope and it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if nothing else, just showing that we're doing some of our due diligence and like making an effort to mitigate that, and having the code of conduct, having some kind of mitigating tools around that will at least show that it will prevent the narrative that like Bitcoin had for a while, and some people still try to bring up that it's like really only used for crime, drugs, violence, things like that, right? And so like we know that that's patently false, but in order to demonstrate that, I think it's important to at least have a show of effort within the community for that. Ultimately, obviously, it's like there's not much that can be done about it once somebody already has the name. Like that's final. But everything around that we can control, and the more effort we put into that, I think the better it'll reflect on us, and the more we will be able to form our culture around it. Speaking of culture, I don't know if anyone has anything to add to this particular topic, but one of the things that I wanted to see touched on this evening for code of conduct would be how we interact with other namespaces, being that there's now at least a half dozen different namespaces just within the crypto community for domains. And I've seen some fairly aggressive memes and messaging around that. So I think having, in addition to what Johnny had mentioned before about like no aggressive gifting, pressing, poking somebody or pestering them too much to accept their name, we should also have some general guidelines around how we interact with other namespaces and really focusing on differentiating the spaces, like how Handshake is different, not immediately calling something a scam or saying that that we're somehow better than them for XYZ.
While we're talking about, I'm going to make a joke. While we're talking about memes, we keep raising the topic of bad actors, and I propose that we use only Nick Cage, Steven Seagal, and Tom Arnold when we reference bad actors. Thank you.
I want to say thank you for prefacing that that you're going to make a joke. I think next time you should preface it as I'm going to make a dad joke or a bad joke, one of those, just so we're prepared. All right, so to bring it back to the topic at hand, I feel very strongly about this because I know the Yat guys, I know Naveen and Fluffy Pony, and I was, when I first started just like talking, I was like, oh, this is good job guys and blah blah, and looking at Yat, they were like, yeah, I was like, this would be a perfect integration with Handshake, and they're like, yeah, but the Handshake community is like, really like, aggressive towards us, and I was like, whoa, what are you talking about? That doesn't sound like the Handshake community I know. And clearly they kind of misinterpreted, I think a tweet from you, Mark. I read it as being helpful. They just misread it. But then there were memes afterwards that are like kind of putting down Yat, and I was like, this is really unnecessary. I think generally I would really support some type of, I don't know how you enforce it, but this idea that, we should be obviously constructive in the community, and to your point, it's about differentiation, not superiority. There's room enough for all. We don't even know exactly where Handshake is going to end up in the pantheon of kind of namespaces. And I would hope that we would be supportive, explicitly, as well as just kind of implicitly towards everything else. I mean, even, that's why we, Mike and I invited, what was his name? Blake? Brent? Brantley to HandyCon, like to, have alternative like views. Like it's an open protocol, it should be an open community. And I think anything which is, I think it's helpful if we call out like, hey, I get you want to be like, team Handshake, but doesn't mean putting other protocols down, because frankly, it's strategic. I don't think Handshake is a strong enough ecosystem and utility yet that it can withstand kind of multi-pronged assault from other communities. Like it's just, they're better funded.
Yeah, and I do know that some of my tweets around Yat were misconstrued in that way. I was a lot more skeptical of Yat initially. I wasn't sure how it was going to pan out, and like frankly, I had a few moments of scarcity mindset, as I have with some other projects. But after reading more into the project, seeing what they're doing, seeing that they put up money to join the Unicode project, I forget the exact name, but knowing more about Ricardo, Fluffy Pony, and Naveen, I don't think that it's like a scam, like implying that it's a complete fraud, that they're going to pull the rug out from everybody, take investor funds, like really shady stuff. Like I don't think that's the case. I don't see the incentives for that happening, and I've shared that publicly. And I would like to, if possible, open more discussion with them, and if they felt that there was aggression specifically from me, I'd like to clear the air there. I do actually have one of their Yats. I ended up losing the auction. It was a tie 1-1, but I ended up purchasing it in the aftermarket, and would be happy to gift that to him as a kind of an olive branch to get open a conversation and clear the air there a bit.
Yeah, and again, I read it because Naveen pointed to me, and I was like, that I don't see why that's aggressive. But anyway. But for sure, other things have come out afterwards, which really are. So I think Yeah, I mean, it'd be great if you just, I don't know, tweeted some stuff to support, like, oh, it's great, or, you know, yacht's super interesting, and I have a yacht. That just some simple stuff. You don't have to, like, you know, kowtow. But I think the other part of it is, I think we just need to, the thing that I got back from Naveen was basically because it's an open community, the actions of one color the entire community. I'm not singling you out, Mark. I'm just saying generally. So like anyone who's creating like, you know, anti-yacht or anything else memes, then on the other side, they're just like, oh, well, Handshake community is this way. And it's like, well, there's a lot of people in the Handshake community and we all have a lot of different opinions and approaches, et cetera. So just something to be conscious of. But I think ideally reinforcing positive, constructive openness where we see kind of negativity, I think at least helps to show that there are, you know, a diversity of voices in the Handshake community, and some of them are open.
Absolutely. And like, frankly, recreating their entire auction on Handshake, probably not the most friendly thing for me to do. I was definitely trolling there. So like, that's something that I think I probably wouldn't have done, like, or wouldn't do in the future, like having thought about that more and realizing both the scope of their project and the fact that the like other namespaces are going to do things that collide with Handshake. Like every namespace is going to collide with Handshake, and I do think that we need to put our best face forward, and that's on me to continue growing and doing better with that also. So yeah, I think that we should promote, especially with memes, more of like positive and differentiation things. I think just generally staying away from negative frames would be best for our messaging. I've already warned H&S memes, or not warned, but like explicitly said that it's not a scam, and like told them like not to do that. That I may also just like end up unfollowing them and like publicly highlighting that this is not conduct that I agree with, and as a result, like I'm distancing myself from that brand, because it is important, like as you said, you know, the actions of a single Handshake account, especially one explicitly dedicated to Handshake memes, I think would be detrimental if we didn't publicly distance ourselves from behavior that we believe goes against the code of conduct, particularly once we finalize that in a formal draft.
Yeah, I think Jihan, this is really helpful that you showed that like very specific interaction, because now we actually have something concrete to touch upon why it's like harmful to just kind of be a dick to other communities. So this is perfect. And then, yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, this code of conduct thing was really just came out as like a shot in the dark kind of experiment, but it does sound like there's some actually like useful cases. Like, for example, point to code of conduct. Hey, you know, kind of encroaching on this specific point. Yeah, and you can kind of publicly call out folks who are kind of being dicks.
I also independently heard from one of our developers that they, after learning more about, like they were also very dismissive of Yats, and then learned more about the team and funding that they have behind it, realized that they're not going anywhere, and what they're trying to do long term, and went into the Discord and started like trying to have a conversation, and was met with a lot of resistance because basically our community has already kind of soured their opinion. And so I think that being that I was probably the most public person against that, or at least trolling in a way in the beginning, I feel that like more of that responsibility would be on me to rectify that and at least set an example after the fact. And so I'll be working to do that moving forward.
I think I speak very much. I appreciate that. I think that's awesome. It really shows the values of the Handshake community, or at least at our best.
Mark, and if you want to, I'd be happy to meet with you and come up with some ideas. We could, I don't know, maybe do anything more publicly, especially on the name base front. I don't know, might be an interesting opportunity for us to interact with those other namespaces, like even as name base more publicly. I think that could be an interesting opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Love to chat more, Jake.
Cool.
So what are your next steps for this code of conduct idea?
Yeah, so it sounds like one reoccurring theme has been this community block list. So that will be its own separate track. And that will tie into like the name base, trademark warning, preventing the profiting from those kinds of names. And then from the code of conduct specifically, so there is this recording, and this is really open-ended right now, how we actually want to go about it. But I was thinking I would just go over this recording, kind of put a very, very rough draft together to kind of summarize the main points and then share it out for specific feedback. And then we can go over it in the next director meeting next month to kind of finalize that. And then in the next call too, we'll definitely want to address name collisions as well. Just have actual specific conversations about that.
Yeah, could we make this a pinned tweet between now and the next meetup, or at least for the next couple of weeks? Make it or not pinned tweet, excuse me, a pinned post on Namer News.
The like rough draft.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, a rough draft, kind of a summary of the conversation as you saw it, and then anybody can chime in and add comments, and then we'll use the comments and conversation that happened within that post to come up with a draft and finalize on the next call. It seems like that would be the optimal approach for it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, love that.
Yeah, let me give you guys a little background about another hat I wear besides an ICANN registrar. So I think Jonathan mentioned this earlier. I'm the chair of the blockchain committee for the International Trademark Association. And so I've got about 20 trademark lawyers in my committee, and they're focused on both threats and opportunities represented by the blockchain. So looking at, for example, how blockchain can help with anti-counterfeiting, the whole supply chain traceability issues, so that not just for luxury goods, but for fake pharmaceuticals, for example, which actually can kill people if they get through the supply chain. But so I have a task group focused specifically on blockchain domain names, and they would love to participate in an exercise like responding to your code of conduct and giving you some feedback on, well, we like this, but this kind of falls short, and here's why. So if you guys are open to that, I could, we could put this in, have this as part of a task group and give you feedback on the code of conduct and see if you're open to some of their suggestions.
That sounds awesome, Tom. And if they want to post on the thread on Namer News, I can also gift a name if they don't have a top level domain. Like you would need one in order to comment. I could gift one just so that, like, hey, this is us. We're just using, a proxy name to be able to access the platform. Otherwise, if you just have like a draft to send in either to Namebase, probably Johnny would be the best contact for that, I think, for the purpose. But yeah, that sounds awesome.
Cool.
All right, guys. I think we've pretty much touched upon what we want to touch upon. Is there anything anybody else wants to add? Doesn't necessarily have to be pertaining to this specific discussion.
I just think in general, like having something in writing on a web page that we could just link to, right? I think, and then when we just keep referring to it, right? Like in any community or any kind of, we have the 10 Commandments in like Christianity, right? And then we quote like we quote that, right? Or even the American Constitution has, so I think we just have this list, right? And it can of course be adjusted, but we would just keep referring to that in Twitter, in Discord. I just think that's the general, start that's needed. And then we just say, this is what we believe in as a community, and we reference it.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Mike. And I was just looking through the Internet Commerce Association link that Jonathan shared out earlier, citing its members. I think it would actually be cool to have something similar for Handshake, and to have a logo like that we can both have like a list of members that have agreed to this like Namebase, namesake domains, and others that have agreed to this code of conduct, put the icon on their website. Sky include also to to signify that like yes, we're behind this initiative, we're part of crafting it, and that will, I think, give some a familiar degree of authentication and security to people that are just getting into the space.
I just want to point out, I put into the chat a link to the DNSabuseframework.org. And so this is a framework. Again, I'm considered a contracted party to ICANN. So the registries and registrars are trying to avoid getting regulated for various things. So we try to adopt a voluntary code of conduct. That's basically what you see here at the DNS abuse framework. This is a code of conduct for what I call the registries and registrars of ICANN. And we're trying to avoid getting regulated into doing certain things for law enforcement or intellectual property and whatnot. So it might be a good starting point for your code of conduct.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Totally had a good read ahead of the call. Quincy, first time meeting. Hey. Thanks for
Hi. Yeah. No, first time meeting. Long-term holder. I guess I had a question going back to I guess trademark names. So as I'm understanding you guys, what you guys are saying is that our concern is that people are buying names that are not in the top 100K and people are squatting on those names.
Correct. Okay,
gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I just needed to get that out of the way. But also so I'm working with Chango, if you guys know her, on DWeb. I'm just volunteering with DWeb Foundation, just however many hours a week.
Great Foundation.
So one of the just 5 hours a week or something like that. But one of the ideas that I had was going down the DNS Live list and seeing what what sites are what sites are reserved, and also who would be a good partner for us. And one of the ideas I came up with was to contact Wikipedia, since they have a large base of users that might give us some kind of critical mass to be able to install the hdns.io resolver. And they responded and they said that they don't have the resources to be able to put the due diligence and see if this is a scam or not. So I guess my question is, does anybody have any ideas for trying to come across like for our project being so like currently being somewhat small right now and doesn't have that kind of credibility? Is there any kind of are there any kind of ideas for projecting credibility to an organization as big as that?
Usually like the list of the investors is pretty helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Has that been shared?
I mean, I just maybe I should, but I did share the like all the resources that we have, name claim, the original handshake.org site, which lists everything. And I mean, Wikimedia is pretty big. They have a large budget, so I'm kind of surprised that they wouldn't even give it a look, before rejecting it. So,
didn't they receive like an airdrop too?
Yeah, I think they have a pretty good airdrop. So maybe when the value of that,
not just the Handshake coin airdrop, because the 10 million that was raised for
that airdrop,
yeah, like actual cash, I think, was donated from Handshake Foundation before it dissolved to Wikimedia, I would imagine.
Oh, really? Okay, I was not aware of that actually.
Yeah, the sponsors page on the wikipedia.org site has a list of some of the organizations they donated that 10 million to, in addition to investors in Handshake.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, I'll just try again, but yeah, no, I just composed a letter. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for being part of the ecosystem.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good project, and I mean, as doing the reading that I've been doing, I mean, ICANN was set up originally to resolve numbers into human readable names, and I mean, our project seems to me that it's the purest form of that. I mean, it kind of renders that organization's job, somewhat obsolete. I mean, I don't know. That's just my view, but
Cool. Is there anything anyone else wants to add before we kind of conclude this? Doesn't necessarily have to be about trademarks, can be regular, everyday kind of handshake question too. It's basically like a clubhouse call now.
Hey, Johnny.
Go ahead and close the recording now.